everyone, welcome. My name is Simon and we are the Whales of Wall Street. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that I have a big interest in over the last few years and done quite a bit of research on, and that is the Cashless Society. So we're going to be going through the sort of principles around what we mean by this, how it will affect us, and perhaps looking at both history and what is going on in today's world that emphasises my point on the Cashless Society. So let's jump straight into this. We'll go straight to the browser. So what I'm believing at the moment is that this is in play right now. And I want us to keep in mind a fundamental principle that I always consider in this kind of thing. And that is when we look at history and we look at change in society and the way that we live and the way that we have our lifestyle and the way that we work, there's always a reason, a creation of an event to bring in a solution that they want to bring in. And when I mean they, I mean whether that's banks, governments, whatever it may be. This is how they would tend to do it. The solution is already pre-planned and they'll implement it, and then us, the general public, will look at this as the new normal moving forwards. And I will pull in a few elements, for example, many organizations like Agenda 30 in terms of the document, the World Economic Forum and DAVOS, and why these all pull together eventually as part of this story build. And relating to the point, really back to the point of cashless society. Now for me, for many years, people have always said to me, like, this is years away, it will never happen. I won't ever use a debit card and things like this. But if you actually look closely, the last sort of 10 years, this transition has already kind of been happening. And actually the conversations of digital currency and cash society have been going on for a number of years themselves as well. But certainly more recently, since around sort of 2015, when a lot of people, from government representatives and countries signed documents like Agenda 30 for sustainability programs, diversification, changes in population, changes in manufacturing, food processing, etc. But one of the key points as well is obviously that net zero and creating a digital currency society. So I'm just going to cast you guys' minds back maybe about 15 years ago when we used to have, banks that you would go into and you'd speak to a cashier or an advisor, and you'd do a majority of your banking through that, physically going into branch. Some of the banks at that point did bring out some online websites, so I was using those at those sorts of times as well. But what happened in that period of time, if we fast forward a bit more to 2007, is that we had this thing called the iPhone launch, and this eradicated a lot of the things that we perceived to do a long time ago, around 15-20 years ago. A lot of it has changed now to a more automated system that accommodates our lifestyle, the way we live, the way we communicate, and essentially bringing a lot of efficiency to our lives, as well as laziness as well, of course. Now, the other side of this is essentially small manipulation, or what I call social engineering, where we've adopted things like social media, which has essentially replaced the traditional TV media. And if you wanted to go down the route of talking about propaganda, it's potentially taking that element as well in terms of censorship, what they want you to see, not what you want to see. And, potentially providing some conflict and dividing that as well. And what that then entails into when we're using smartphones more and these sorts of systems is essentially giving these companies or giving our representatives more control, potential removal of our rights, and potential removal of some of our thought processing as well, and the ability to think for ourselves. And this is all kind of like rapidly disappearing over the years. So what do I mean by this? Well, basically, as I mentioned before about creating a reason or an event to then therefore implement a solution and an ideology that will help us move forward. And it will always look like the government or the banks are the saviors, and they're the ones that are moving us forward. And what I want to bring to your attention right now, if we look back in history, there's always been cases where banking institutions, or particularly what I call the elites or the rich families, have always maintained an element of they're looking to show that there is a problem, but we're going to fix it for you, but actually we're going to win and gain a lot more out of it as well. So, for example, 1907, when we had one of the key issues of bankings falling apart in many companies, they called it the Panic of 1907. And this is JP Morgan, which we all know as the company, but of course they were a family at that period of time. And, as I've highlighted here, for example, the domination of the amount of money and power that they had, they were able to essentially try and bail out a lot of companies and banks, put a load of interest rates on there. And then, of course, when the time came for them to pay up, they couldn't. So then JP Morgan would essentially take out the shares or ownership of these companies, and thus improving his empire moving forwards. We can fast forward through the 1933 situation, the Emergency Banking Act that came in, allowing more printing of money, the Federal Reserve creation. And what was quite interesting about this formulation was a lot of people had gold coins at this period of time. The governments of which at the time provided essentially an ultimatum of, if you do not trade your gold in for $20.67, I believe it is, for per ounce, you will be fined $10,000 or potentially face imprisonment. So all these people who had savings in gold were forced to put in their gold, and then eventually 5-10 years later, the government increased the cost of gold to $35 per ounce, and essentially meaning that around 69% of Americans lost their savings. So there's all these sorts of things, but the idea behind that emphasis was that it was to help improve the status of the American economy and the banking systems and make them a bit more of a powerhouse in the world. That led you to the 1944 agreement, where they did increase the gold cost, but as we mentioned, dominating the power of the world economy. So making it look like they brought in these great acts to help people out, when actually it was to try and enforce more power to the elites and the government representatives at the time. In 1971, the termination of the gold and dollar partnering or pairing, again helping boost the economy and the power of the US across the world, and meaning that other countries couldn't swap their dollars for gold in the future. So kind of creating a bit more dominance there. And then we moved across to where we are looking at now, is that whole depreciation of the dollar. And this coincides with the Cashless Society and the Great Reset and things like this as we move forward. But over this period of time, since 1913 to 2019, and essentially now, the whole US dollar has lost 96% of its purchasing power, which is quite phenomenal. And there's been multiple situations throughout those years, stock crashes and this, that and the other, that have all essentially been manipulated, all been created to formulate reasons and acts to look like they're helping out, to look like they're improving the economies, when actually it was more so to create the problem in order to obtain more control, and take even more away from the general public. So we can see there's a clear pattern here of diminishing dollar, and we're sort of a brink of the madness of the pandemic and everything else. Where we are with that in this period of time is quite confusing, and it's quite worrying in some aspects as well. But the narrative of governments and banks has always been that they're trying to save us, when actually, really, in my opinion, it's to create the problem for their own greater gains and essentially further control, bring in acts and changes of policy. Now, this kind of leads me on really to where is the proof of cashless society coming from? Now, there's multiple things going on at the moment across the world, with the likes of digital yuan, PayPal introducing crypto payments, the digital dollar conversations, the digital sterling, of course, for our country in particular. But what fascinates me the most as well is, and again, relating back to creating an event to create a solution and a new policy and way of living. And this, bear in mind, is only one element of the Agenda 30 plan and the World Economic Forum's plans that are coming ahead, because we want to keep this down to crypto, right, guys? So in terms of currencies. Now, banks are closing left, right and centre. We've seen recently in the news of HSBC closing a load of their banks over the last couple of years. Barclays, actually my bank currently, I've got a letter through the post recently that all 3 of my local branches have closed down. And then you link back to what I said a moment ago about smartphones and, not necessarily the control element, but what's being left for us in terms of the forcing of moving into this, essentially this establishment and area of finance, because there's a lot of people out there that have relied on going to banks and this, that and the other and said, I don't have a smartphone, I don't have this, don't have that, I don't have a debit card. Now all of a sudden, with a narrative, we all know what's happened in the last year, but very conveniently has pushed more so this requirement of cashless payment, tap and go, the use of smartphones. More and more people have smartphones now, even in the older generations. The signs are there, guys. The signs are clear that this is happening. And, there's pros and cons to being cashless, of course. There's the sense of the pros of, removing potential corruption, money laundering, tax evasion and things like this. But the con side of it is, there's potential some, scary elements here. But look at this. This is how many banks have closed since 2015 in the UK. There's quite a phenomenal amount of banks here or in general, but more importantly, how many banks of each of these branches are closing down as well. So the proof is in the pudding here in terms of what's happening there. And I do think it's important to note as well that since the 80s, 3 to 4% of currency exists in a physical format. So no idea where the rest of it is, but all I can say is just from the research that I have done, is that 96% of money, which is printed by the way, is created by banks themselves. So where on earth is this extra money flowing around? And this is of course what contributes to inflation, money supply, and ultimately, unfortunately, the eventual recessions and the eventual crashes that we do see to try and reverse the problems. But more importantly, as mentioned in the historic elements, it gives companies and elite families, etc., to be able to monopolize even further and take advantage of the demise of many companies and businesses. And especially, as you can see, in 2008 in the stock crash, all those banks that disappeared, all the companies that disappeared or got bought out by monopolized families and companies and organizations. The exact same things happen now, really, over the last year as well. A lot of consolidation with companies and certain companies taking even bigger advantage and becoming even bigger and bigger themselves. Not naming a few e-commerce platforms, I'm sure you can guess some of their names, of course. But this is a sort of a very much a big transitional period right now. And I just wanted to bring your attention where I mentioned earlier about the World Economic Forum and Davos. Now, these forums have been around for decades, essentially. The World Economic Forum is built up of multiple countries and politicians and very much rich people, because for these events like Davos, you have to have, I think, £400,000 or something per ticket. But all the agenda points, definitely have a look, guys, because this is fascinating. All the different transitional agendas that they're trying to pull in for the next 5-10 years. And as I mentioned with Agenda 30, this is a real document, by the way, on the UN site. Download it. It's quite long, but have a look and start planning, because you have the whole narrative and story here for the next 9-10 years. So but going back to the World Economic Forum, of course, one of the key points here, resetting the digital currency. Now, this is again, well, as I mentioned, all the types of people and organizations that come to these agendas and these conferences, albeit it was virtual this year because of obvious reasons. This is in the pipeline for sure, to remove fiat currency and digitalize it. And this is quite interesting because in the research that I'd done throughout this whole pandemic, an act passed in America last year called the Banking for All Act. And I thought this was quite interesting. This pulls together basically legislation and acts to offer the definition for digital dollars as well as digital wallets, provides the provision of pass-through digital wallet from the mandate for all member banks to open and maintain digital dollar wallets for all persons, including those eligible to receive stimulus. So this is preparation, guys. Like, if you're not getting prepared now, I seriously suggest starting looking into it more and more. But going back to this point here of this act, this is essentially demonstrating that banks are preparing, organisations are preparing. What proof do we have here of this happening? Well, it's quite clear. When this came out, already beforehand, a few months before the pandemic even started, the likes of Microsoft had already started plans for using cryptocurrency systems, using activity data, tracking data through tracing apps and this, that and the other, using a blockchain motive and cryptocurrency to determine people's movements and this, that and the other, body heat, temperatures, the reactions to adverts, the reaction to this, the reaction to that, along the lines of being able to mine crypto with your movements and what you're doing in a day-to-day basis. But equally as well, throughout their patent, which you can see online, you can download it, integrates cryptocurrency system, communication network, user devices, i.e. smartphones, and sensors. This is very interesting because that involves AI chips and things like this embedded into humans. I wonder how they will do that. But that then pulls in the whole identity situation of ID 2020, digital identity. This is through blockchain, biometrics, guys. This isn't made up. This is all pre-planned, conveniently, just before these acts come to life. So there's no doubt in my mind that these guys have been thinking about this before. This is coming. This reverts back to my point about getting everyone into smartphones, getting everyone used to all these systems. People think it's a great thing, and then they'll snap the finger, everything will change, digital currency will come in, and we'll go, yeah, this is normal, this is fine. At the end of the day, there's good things and bad things, as we discussed. What's more interesting is at the same time as all this Microsoft patent and all these acts coming in, Visa files a patent for a cryptocurrency system to replace cash. Guys, how much more information do we need here? This causes the removal of the physical currency in a fiat currency system. Okay, leveraging private blockchains to improve the ecosystem. The patent is here, everyone. You can read it yourselves, go and download it, go and view it on the US government sites. It's all here. 2019 this was done, November 2019. And if I remember correctly, that was a similar time to when the Relief Act was being created by the American government, Donald Trump signing it back in that day, and conveniently 2-3 months later changed it to the COVID Relief Fund. You can look it all up, it's all there, and it's all happened at exactly the same time, exactly the same period of time, just before we know what happened. And just as it happens that we remove cash out of the system, you can't go and use cash in your local shops anymore. You can't go and buy coffee with cash anymore. Tap and go, pay by card. Guys, let's wake up to this. This then brings me back to something very interesting to sort of finish off here with in terms of the Cashless Society conversation. The Better Than Cash Alliance. Why have I pulled in all the information about the World Economic Forum, Agenda 30, all of the things that Microsoft are doing, Visa are doing? Well, it all kind of leads to this as well. Why digital payments? Based at the United Nations, guys, by the way, the Better Than Cash Alliance is a partnership of governments, companies, and international organizations that accelerates the transition from cash, fiat, to responsible digital payments to help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 30, Sustainability, Agenda 30, World Economic Forum, Sustainability, Development, Digital Currency. Look at it. UN, all here. UN, Agenda 30. It all links together. Here's the logo, Agenda 30 logo. Okay. Who is in the alliance? Let's have a look at some of these members. This is brilliant. Who do you think is going to be on here? I can tell you one of them indefinitely will be on here. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Fantastic. You can look at many of the different companies on here. These are interesting. Coca-Cola and Unilever, why would they be on there? I'm telling you now, it's not because of their drinks and their fabric softener. Have a look more into detail as to what else they do in those companies, and you'll see why. But here's another one. Resource companies, Visa, MasterCard. What do they deal with? Let's have a think about that for a second. And one other thing as well, which is quite interesting on here, the Clinton Global Initiative. That is the Clinton family that we all know and love. Bill Clinton and Hillary, of course. Clinton Foundation. All of these kind of companies dealt with the Banking for All Act. They all signed and backed it, invested in it. So, it all links together. Absolutely 100%. If you don't think Cashless Society is coming, then I don't know what more to say to you. This is a fascinating topic to me. There is no right and wrong about it. I think that it's just a period of transition for the fourth industrial revolution. Whether it was a necessity or not is to be seen. What comes out of it is to be seen. I am concerned about the control element in the near future. That whole kind of like, Black Mirror effect, isn't it? Of social scoring, potential credit controlling what you can and cannot buy, where you can purchase, where you can't purchase. We've obviously seen a news article recently that I posted a video on the other day, banks potentially removing the opportunity for you to even put your money in exchanges where you want them to go. So there's so many things there that are so uncertain and worrying. It's all being played out and pushed out as a nice fluffed up lovely thing that's going to occur, but we've got to be cautious, of course, like with anything. All this does, guys, is lets me leave you with this, which I found it very interesting. Here's our friend here, Bill. When historians write the book on the COVID-19 pandemic, what we've lived through so far will probably take up only the first third or so. The bulk of the story will be what happens next. Well, if there wasn't a nice little line that I could end this video on, well, that was it. So that really, guys, leaves me to say that I hope you enjoyed the video. Apologies if it rambled on a bit, but hopefully I got a point across to you guys that there's of great importance and interest in this particular topic. Get planning, get prepared, and expect in the next few months, I'm sure of it, of some even more interesting stories coming out from our governments, from our media outlets, of digital currencies being pushed even further, with the narrative of this last year being the reason why, when actually it's been going on for absolutely years and years. And we'll see how this plays out, but certainly the next couple of years, don't expect to have that old funny money around anymore. Get prepared. Start looking more into digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, and invest wisely. But do keep an eye on what's going to happen with those coins and those paper monies going into a digital format, and what that will bring to the table. So, like I said, I hope you've enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe the video. It really helps the channel. And other than that, I hope to see you guys on the moon. Thank you. Take care.